Hey all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Kate if you're new. Happy to have you here. I am coming to you today with a book haul. I haven't done one in a long time because my book buying habits have turned into a little bit more of like a steady trickle. And so like every couple weeks, my wife and I usually end up at some kind of bookstore, whether it's a Barnes & Noble or a used bookstore or a Friends of the Library sale or something like that. And most of the time we end up getting at least one book each, sometimes more like 2 or 3. So none of my individual shopping trips have felt worthy of a haul. But over the last like 6-ish months or so, I have developed quite a bit that I need to talk about. So the very first one on the list is going to be Thrice Married to a Salted Fish Volume 3. This came out, I am filming this on Thursday. This came out last week. I bought it on Saturday. I started it on Sunday. I finished it on Monday. I talk about this series all the time, so I'm not going to belabor the point. I love this series so much. The 4th and final volume comes out in October, and I can't wait to read it. Next, I have kind of a double feature, except they don't actually have anything to do with each other. But a funny thing happened in the publishing marketing world, which is that 2 highly anticipated queer fantasies came out within a couple weeks of each other, both written by authors who got their original following through YouTube. And we have The Secret World of Briar Rose by Cindy Pham and The Unmagical Life of Briar Jones by Lex Croucher. Someone should have caught this. So we're going to start with this one. The Secret World of Briar Rose is a queer Sleeping Beauty retelling where the princess has been asleep for 100 years and our other main character is following her younger sister who went to try to find this princess, and it turns out that she might actually be kind of living in this alternate world. This seems to deal with kind of a lot of themes of like maladaptive daydreaming and depression, but in kind of the trappings of a queer young adult fantasy. I love queer fairy tale retellings. That's a great genre for me. Next, The Unmagical Life of Briar Jones. This is about a kid named Briar who, when they were young, did not get into magical school, but their best friend did. And now many, many years later, they are re-meeting up with that best friend and realizing that that best friend maybe became a villain. So we do have a non-binary main character. This also very much has some dark academia magical school vibes. I've really enjoyed other books that I've read by Lex Croucher, but I've currently only read their adult Regency romances. I haven't read their young adult fantasy yet, but I'm really excited to see what they're gonna do with a queer adult fantasy. That sounds really fun to me. Next, speaking of Lex Croucher's adult Regency romances, I do have Trouble by Lex Croucher. I own and have read both Reputation and Infamous, which are books 1 and 2 of this series. My copy of Infamous I lent out to a friend and I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but I'm hoping to get that back soon. I have not read this one yet, but I know it features a governess who is kind of taking the place of her sister, who is actually really good with children, but is really either sick or injured and so can't do it. So she steps in instead and hijinks ensue. And Lex Croucher does a fun thing where even if the main pairings appear straight from the outset, they're usually full of chaotic bisexuals on the inside. So I enjoy that a lot. All right, next is one I'm not going to talk too long about it because I have already mentioned it on this channel. I have had my copy of Jasmine Throne just kind of sitting on my shelf for like 4 or 5 years, but I finally started reading it this year, and so I did purchase The Oleander Sword and The Lotus Empire. I have read Oleander Sword, book 2. I have not yet read book 3, Lotus Empire, because book 2 was kind of putting me into a reading slump. It was just really long. So I'm taking a little break before I get into book 3, but I was just recently writing some notes for book 1 and 2 for when I do my quarterly wrap-up soon, and it honestly did remind me a lot of the stuff that I really liked about this series. So I do think I'm gonna get to book 3 like before the end of the year is my hope. All right, next we're gonna get into a little bit of a historical fantasy section. The first one of these is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. I read The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, that whole trilogy. I really, really loved it. And that one is like, I believe 1800s or maybe earlier Russia inspired. This one is World War I inspired. Our main character was a field nurse in World War I until she was injured and discharged. Her brother was still fighting, and this book starts when she receives like his effects as if he has died. She doesn't totally necessarily believe that he's dead though. It's possible that he maybe got kind of transported to some maybe kind of other realm kind of situation. World War II is focused on a lot more heavily in historical fiction, and so I really like when people go back to World War I. This kind of reminds me of Ghost Talkers a little bit by Mary Robinette Kowal, which is about a woman who's working in kind of like a secret service division of the intelligence agency where they're mediums and they basically take messages from soldiers who have died at the front. And then that ends up like triggering a murder mystery where one ghost comes back and says, I didn't die by enemy fire, I died by someone on our side. And so I think they both have kind of a similar World War I mystery thing going on. I really liked Ghost Stalkers. I'm really excited to see what this one does. And I've really liked Catherine Arden stuff. All right, next one, we're skipping from World War I to World War II. We have The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. This one is set in West Virginia, where there's this hotel where a bunch of the like Axis power diplomats are now being like kind of imprisoned, but you need to still treat them well. And so there's this like weird tension between the staff and the guests. As someone who's spent a lot of years in the customer facing position trenches, I really like books that deal with like tricky customer service situations. And there's also kind of a magical realism aspect to this, where there's this spring underneath the hotel that seems to have the potential to either kind of heal or harm depending on like the attitude of the guests and how happy they are and things like that. Haven't gotten into this one yet, but this is Maggie Stiefvater's first adult fantasy. I've read pretty much all of her young adult fantasy, and I really loved a lot of what she's done. And I think that magical realism is a fun area for her to play in. Now, this next series is a little bit less like purely our world fantasy and more kind of like alternative historical fantasy. It's going to be To Shape a Dragon's Breath and To Ride a Rising Storm by Monoquill Blackgoose. Now, these are the first two books of the Nampeshawayasit trilogy, or actually just series. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy. And this one very much is like our world, but with the serial numbers just slightly filed off. So if you look at the map, which there is a lovely map on the inside, it's things like, you know, Russia is Rusland, Africa is Afrika, things like that. Alternate historical fantasy with dragons is genuinely one of my favorite subgenres. I have like a whole section of it back behind me. And now I haven't started this series. I bought book 2 just on faith. I have heard that book 2 is a little bit middle booky, which does worry me a little bit. But what I also did hear is that if this is book 2 of a trilogy, we should be a little bit worried. But if this is book 2 of like a 4 or 5 book series, then this makes total sense for the pacing. So I guess we're just gonna have to see how many there's gonna be in this series. But this is literally alternate history fantasy with dragons. It's one of my favorite things. Now, these next ones, most of the ones, if I don't mention where I got them from, it's probably that I just got them at a Barnes & Noble. These next ones I picked up at a Friends of the Library book sale. They were having a deal where they had these just like paper bags, like standard paper grocery bags that you could take, and each bag that you filled with books was $5. Not each book, each bag. So we did only get one bag, most of which my wife got, which is most of that like pile back there by the typewriter. I only ended up getting 2, although I do regret they had a copy of Yellowface by R.F. Kuang that I didn't pick up because it was a hardcover copy and I wanted a soft cover copy, but I'm kind of regretting that now. And so there were a few things that I was looking at, but the only things that I actually put in the bag and took home were A Kata Witch and A Kata Warrior by Nnedi Okorafor. I read both of these on audiobook maybe a few years ago, but I decided I wanted to get physical copies, 1, to have a shelf trophy for my audiobooks, but 2, because recently book 3 came out, which is A Kata Woman. I didn't even know there was going to be a book 3, and I do remember finishing book 2 and going, that was a weird ending for a duology. I don't know, man. So anyway, it wasn't a duology, it was a trilogy. The premise of A Kata Witch, this is a Nigerian urban fantasy. Our main character is albino. She grew up in the US. Her family then decides to move back to Nigeria, and she discovers that she is actually part of this like magical secret society that exists. I'm excited to finally finish this series. I didn't know that there was going to be a third one for a while. Now, our next one I'm a tiny bit hesitant about, which is I Have Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan. This is book 1 of the Drowned World duology. Where like I read the synopsis for this one and it was giving me a lot of like Aliette de Bedard's House of Shattered Wings vibes. And then I finished the synopsis and realized that Aliette de Bedard had in fact blurbed the book. So I was just like, okay, this is reminding me of one of my favorite authors, and one of my favorite authors said that she really liked it. So I'm gonna have to check it out. Unfortunately, the reason I'm a little hesitant about it is that I've seen some people read this on BookTube that have said it was kind of mid. But the premise of this one is that there is kind of the human city that is above the water, and then beneath them, both literally and figuratively, are all of these kind of sea creatures like sirens, kelpies, all those kinds of things. Those are the Fathom Folk. And our main character is the first like mixed human Fathom Folk person to be allowed into the police rankings. Now, I read the first couple of chapters of this and I really liked it, so I am still going to try this one, but I will admit my enthusiasm did get dimmed a little bit, but it is only a duology, so there's not that much to commit to when I do get to it, so I think I'm still gonna try this one. Next, we have some new releases by one of my favorite authors. We are gonna be talking about Kate Elliott for a little bit. First is Unconquerable Sun, I have had for a while, but recently Furious Heaven finally came out in paperback and I was able to pick it up. This series I haven't talked about much because I thought it was going to be a duology, and so I was just like, let's just wait for book 2 and then we'll just read it immediately. And then I caught book 2, opened it up, and realized that no, this is not a duology, this is actually a trilogy. And so I don't know what I'm going to do about that. Because here's the thing, I absolutely adore this author. It is an auto-by-author, and the premise of this series is, what if Alexander the Great was a lesbian in space? That's fucking phenomenal. That's kind of all I need to know. I didn't think 2026 was going to be the year of gay space for me, but having already read like the Memory Called Empire books and the Everina Maxwell books this year, maybe this is a year of gay space for me. I don't know. What if Alexander the Great was a lesbian in space? I need to read this. All right. Next on my Kate Elliott list is, I thought the Unconquerable Sun was going to be a duology. I was wrong about that, but she did in fact release an entire duology. I think this one maybe came out last year, but this one just recently got released. I didn't realize this until I sat down to film this. I bought these without ever reading the synopsis to them. I had no idea what these books were about, but from what I have read of the synopsis now, this is about a kind of commoner ex-slave courier named Elin who is hired by the prince to take him to this magical place. She warns him not to do something. He doesn't listen, and he comes out a shell of himself. And so now they have to still complete this quest with a prince who is a literal shell of himself. I love a good duology. I love a good Kate Elliott fantasy. I don't know when I'm going to have time for these, but these are definitely high up on my list. Next, we're going to get back into some used bookstore finds. So a book that I have talked about, I think a couple times on this channel, but I don't think I've talked about it recently, is The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe. This got made into a movie starring Channing Tatum and Jamie Bell. The movie is not great, but it is very, very gay. The book is great and is also very, very gay, but in two very different ways. The movie is very enemies to lovers. The book series is very just fated soulmates, okay? Both of which are delightful, but very different vibes. Now, this one I've had for a while, but it is technically part of a trilogy that she wrote about Rome and Britain. And so I did recently find book 2, which is The Silver Branch. Now, these are not related at all. They're really only connected by being set in Roman occupied Britain. I don't think there's any crossover between the characters, but I just absolutely adored The Eagle of the Ninth. When were these published? The 50s, I think? Now, Rosemary Sutcliffe went to art school, so I know that she knew that gay people existed. These books were written in the 50s, however, so she couldn't make it explicit that gay people existed, but my God, is The Eagle of the Ninth so gay. And I'm hoping that The Silver Branch is too. Now, these next few I got on a visit to Portland to visit my family. There's a giant bookstore called Powell's there that has a mix of new and used on the shelves. So the first one that I got is part of a used bookstore project, hunt that I am doing, which is that I am trying to collect gently used paperback editions of the entire Hunger Games series. Now, currently, I only have a copy of the first one. They had new paperback versions of Catching Fire and Mockingjay, but I just know these books have been out for long enough that I'm gonna be able to find gently used versions that are a little bit cheaper. This is not a huge priority for me. I'm willing for this to take years, but this is one that I'm working on. Now, I also, on that same trip, picked up One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I read this pretty soon from when I actually did that trip, months ago. I did end up getting book 2 out of the library because they didn't have a used copy of it. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know that I need book 2 physically, and I don't know that I even necessarily need to keep book 1. I really enjoyed it. It felt very familiar, mostly in a good way, but I just don't see it as a book that I'm going to be returning to. So even though I did enjoy this, I might end up letting it go soon, just in the sense of let's give it to someone else that's going to get more enjoyment out of it now that I've gotten what I'm going to get out of it. All right, now these next ones I picked up at Half Price Books. I do like to do that thing of we collect a bunch of books that we're willing to get rid of, we bring them in, and they give us some money for them, and we end up coming home with a book or 2 out of the money that they gave us. One of the projects that I am working on is collecting the Scholomance trilogy by Naomi Novik. So I currently have 2 out of 3. I have Deadly Education and The Last Graduate. The last one, Golden Enclaves, I think only came out within the last few years. So I'm not sure that there's a ton of paperback copies that have trickled down to the used bookstores yet. So this is another one where it might take some time before I like fully finish the set and read them. Now this one has got some like dark academia, magical school vibes to it. The basic premise is that there is this school called the Scolomancy that was set up as kind of protection for magical students because there are a lot of demons and monsters and things that want to eat them for their magic. And so the school that they're in, like some of the monsters manage to get through, but it's more the weaker ones can get through the wards. So the students are in a deadly place, but not as deadly as the outside world would be. Is kind of my understanding, and that also they gain power as they go through the school, like it's set up kind of like a spiral. And so once they get out, presumably they are strong enough to deal with what is outside of the school. I like Naomi Novik. I've really loved some of her books, liked others and not liked others. So she's a little bit mixed for me. She's not always an auto buy. I've heard some kind of mixed reviews of this one, which is one of the reasons I haven't immediately rushed out to get it. But I still like Naomi Novik enough that I'm willing to give it a shot. All right, now this next one ties into my previous Cruel Prince review, where at the end of it, I was saying that there's this whole duology that follows Oak like 8 years later. Will I read it? Probably. Am I going to rush out and buy it? No. Will I pick it up if I find them in used bookstores? Probably. I found a copy of The Stolen Heir, and it was even the like Barnes & Noble exclusive fancy edition. So I have not started this yet. I'm waiting until I find a copy of book 2, The Lost Throne, I think. Ooh, that is difficult to read through the camera, huh? Anyway, I liked Cruel Prince. I think I gave it overall like a 3.5 star. And as I mentioned, I did enjoy Oak. I am curious to see what he's like as a teenager. I'm just hoping, genuinely, I am hoping that the plot of this one is just a little bit stronger than The Cruel Prince, because that was really the thing that annoyed me the most, is that like the relationship stuff was fun. After book 1, the plot just kind of became fucking nonsense. So I'm really hoping that she's going to be able to pick that up in this sequel series. But speaking of Holly Black, I have a couple other books here. So we have Book of Night and Thief of Night by Holly Black. Book of Night I've had for a while, but Thief of Night I just recently picked up. I had heard very, very mid things about Book of Night, book 1. And so I was really hesitant about the series in general. I really love when Holly Black does heists, and this is more of a heisty book with like a con artist. And like genuinely my favorite series of hers is the Curse Worker trilogy, which is also about magical con artists. So I think that this would still be up my alley, but a lot of people said that book 2, Thief of Night, actually delivers on the promise of Book of Night, book 1. So even if there's kind of a rough start to book 1, I just really love when she does magical cons. That's really fun for me. I really vastly prefer it to her fairy books, to be totally honest. All right, my next one. We are getting so close, guys. We only have a few more. This one just ties into my love of like the use of gods in fantasy and like what happens when gods fall. We have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simone Jimenez. I've been hearing about this one for a while. I know it got a decent amount of buzz. And this one has like a tyrannical family. It has a sleeping god. They're going to try to wake up the god, I believe, in order to kind of help overthrow this tyrannical family. That's just a lot of things I like. Now, for our second to last, we're getting so close. We have Dark Rise, but then more specifically, we have Dark Heir, book 2 of the Dark Rise trilogy. I think I heard at some point that these are based off of like the Susan Cooper Dark is Rising series, but I don't actually remember where I heard that. So someone let me know if you've heard that too. But this one is another urban fantasy. Our main character, Will, suddenly finds out that he is part of this like magical lineage of stewards that are meant to guard the light for when the dark rises. Judging from the kind of smoky demon horns on the cover of book 2, I'm guessing that gets a little bit complicated. So yeah, I haven't started these ones, but I do really like C.S. Pacat as an author. I read her Captive Prince trilogy a couple years ago, and it just gave me such nostalgic 2000s fanfiction vibes. And I was kind of raised on early 2000s fanfiction, so it did a lot of good things for me. I don't actually know if we have a release date for book 3 yet, but I really like C.S. Pacat, so we'll see. And last of this book haul, finally, we have Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan, which I've had for a while. More specifically, we have the sequel, All Hail Chaos. This is the Time of Iron series, where our main character, Ray, is like dying in our world and then gets transmigrated into her favorite work of fiction as the villainess and decides that, you know what, fuck it. She's just going to be in her villain era. Now, I believe book 2 is when the despotic emperor character finally makes his appearance after all of the derailing of his plotline that happened in book one. And I think he's got some of that like psychopath in love kind of feeling, which is one of my favorites. I love Sarah Rees Brennan so much. And I have been trying to get people to read her for over a decade. And she gets blurred by all these authors, like Tasha Suri is on here, Alex E. Harrow is on here, Holly Black, Leigh Bardugo. Like, come on, guys. If you like those authors, you should check out Sarah Rees Brennan. She writes some of the best dialogue I've read. And she does great character work, really fun magic and world building. I'm so excited for this series. I've been waiting to read book one until book two came out, because I think this one came out a couple of years ago and we just hadn't heard anything about book two for a while. There is going to be a third one in theory, and we have absolutely no idea when that's going to come out, because this one just came out in May. But you can bet I'm going to be buying book three when it comes out, because I'm probably going to have read books 2 and 3 by then. I don't do a great job about reading series before they're like fully published and finished, but for Sarah Rees Brennan, I will bite that bullet and jump on that grenade. So that is going to be it for my book haul of the last like 6-ish months. Let me know if there's anything that you've picked up recently that you're really excited about, or a favorite recent read, and I will see you soon with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.